Part 4 on the origins of COVID-19. Hello, this is John Hnatio reporting for the Objective News Network. In Part 3 of our series on the origins of COVID-19, we covered assertions 1 and 2 of the nagging questions on the true origins of COVID-19. In Part 4, we are going to move on to assertions 3 and 4. So let's start by taking a look at assertion 3. Does the People's Republic of China possess the capability to bioengineer coronavirus, COVID-19? Authentication takes us to this article in Scientific American written by Smriti Malapati. Here we are told that the Chinese government recognizes that biosciences will play a major role in its global competitiveness. Biomedicine, synthetic biology, and regenerative medical techniques are listed as strategic fields and industries in China's 13th five-year plan. In September of 2001, a scientist at Sun Yat-sen University in Guangzhou had successfully grown rabbit embryos injected with skin cell nuclei taken from a 7-year-old boy. And I quote from the article, "The resulting hybrids could be used to derive human embryonic stem cells useful for regenerative medicine," close quote. This remarkable feat was not thought possible by Western scientists, and was roundly condemned by the world community. The article goes on to describe the Chinese government's regulatory approach as, quote, pragmatic, in which it copy-pastes international regulations, largely following the relative permissive stance of the United Kingdom. We are told that China has cleared the regulatory route for research to attract many overseas Chinese scientists and non-Chinese collaborators. The PRC has used permissive regulation to grow the bioengineering industry at a remarkable pace. In 2015, Chinese researchers became the first to use CRISPR on non-viable human embryos. CRISPR, or clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats, is a technology that can be used to edit genes and as such will likely change the world. The essence of CRISPR is simple. It's a way of finding a specific bit of DNA inside a cell. After that, the next step in CRISPR, gene editing, is usually to alter that piece of DNA. The Scientific American article goes on to say that in ethical practice, Chinese science remains highly variable. Decisions about how to implement broad brush guidelines are left to the discretion of individual institutions and researchers. For example, the claims of genome-edited twins by a Chinese researcher at the Southern University of Science and Technology of China is a case in point. A Chinese researcher admitted that implementation of ethical standards and of standards in general by especially universities and hospitals in remote regions of China are sketchy. And I quote, "When it comes to enforcing standard practices across the whole of China, we still have a long way to go." Again, the USIC report is strangely quiet about Chinese ethical violations of global biotechnology norms. The ability of Chinese researchers, and thus the Chinese military, to engineer in the laboratory bioweapons using advanced genetic engineering techniques, it stands as a significant piece of circumstantial evidence supporting the possibility that the emergence of COVID-19 may be the result of intentional construction. The PRC's past history of ethical departures from global bioresearch norms is another significant piece of circumstantial evidence indicating that some Chinese researchers are willing to cross red lines in the field of bioengineering. In a paper written 4 years prior to the breakout of COVID-19 in Wuhan, 18 scientists and members of the military wrote a paper entitled The Unnatural Origin of SARS and New Species of Man-Made Viruses as Genetic Bioweapons, in which they stated that a family of viruses called coronaviruses could be, and I quote, artificially manipulated into emerging human disease virus, then weaponized and unleashed in a way never seen before, close quote. This is a direct piece of evidence that expresses the interest and the motivation of the Chinese military, in this case the People's Liberation Army, to have constructed COVID-19. It also infers that COVID-19 was possibly engineered based on the same breakthroughs made by the Chinese when they first used CRISPR on non-viable human embryos in 2015. Next, let's type in Sino-Russian cooperation in biotechnology. In his book, Made in China, Jasper Becker tells us that in the early 1950s, the Chinese sent delegations of the People's Liberation Army and students to the Soviet Union to study microbiology and infectious diseases. When the delegations returned to China, they set up bioweapons research organizations that possibly became the model for China's current bioweapons program. This early cooperation, when coupled with the bioweapons brain drain that accompanied the fall of the Soviet Union, and Russia's newfound alliance with China, represents a significant piece of circumstantial evidence that the fast ascent of the Chinese biotech industry, and along with it their bioweapons program and the ability to genetically engineer pathogens, may have benefited from past Soviet and now Russian cooperation in bioweapons research, development, and production. Next, authentication takes us to this article entitled The Rise in Sino-Russia Biotech Cooperation, written by Svetlana Lebedenko. Here we are told that the People's Republic of China's emergence as a global superpower is rooted in the rapid development of its innovation infrastructure, which is complemented by intensifying cooperation with the Russian Federation. The article goes on, and I quote, Beijing and Moscow are actively developing a joint innovation infrastructure. The two countries declare 2020 and 2021 the cross years of Russian and Chinese scientific, technical, and innovation cooperation. The article concludes, and I quote again, Western decoupling from China and Russia has been pushing the two countries toward deepening their cooperation. The accelerating Sino-Russian innovation cooperation projects confirm this assumption. After February 24, 2022, Western sanctions and companies fleeing Russia will force Moscow to seek deeper cooperation with China in high-tech sectors. Given the past trajectory of joint innovation partnership, naturally China is now Russia's ultimate bet when it comes to biotechnology development. Russian biotech future is in China's hands. There are not currently signs that China will change its favorable position towards Russia. Hence, Sino-Russian innovation partnerships will likely intensify, close quote. This too serves as another piece of circumstantial evidence indicating that Russia and China's alliance in biotech may have facilitated the transfer of advanced genetic gain-of-function research from the former Soviet Union and now the Russian Federation bioweapons program to Communist China. Next, let's move to question number 4 on the list and ask ourselves the question, was the PRC interested and motivated to genetically engineer COVID-19? Again, we turn to the 2015 report written by 18 Chinese military scientists and their weapons experts in a paper entitled The Unnatural Origin of SARS and New Species of Man-Made Viruses as Genetic Bioweapons. As pointed out earlier, the Chinese military and their weapons scientists stated that a family of viruses called coronaviruses could be, and we quote, artificially manipulated into emerging human disease virus, then weaponized and unleashed in a way never seen before. This document, written 4 years before the pandemic began in Wuhan, China in December 2019, stands as direct evidence of PRC interest and motivation to genetically engineer a new class of lethal, fast-spreading, prophylaxis-resistant, fast-mutating pathogens. In this case, the very same COVID-19 pathogen that first emerged in Wuhan, China. The document also highlighted how these engineered viruses would lead to, quote, a new era of genetic weapons, close quote, in which a bioweapon attack could cause, and I quote, the enemy's medical system to collapse, close quote. This report must be considered as a highly significant circumstantial piece of evidence that the PLA operates an active bioweapons program. The clandestine development of incurable, fast-mutating prophylaxis-resistant pathogens to destroy the enemy is the purpose of any biological weapons program. On the other hand, unless you are unstable of mind, you must first have to find a vaccine to protect your own people. This stands as a highly significant piece of circumstantial evidence that if COVID-19 was genetically engineered at the Wuhan Virology Institute, its release was almost certainly an unintentional bioweapons accident. It seems unlikely that the education of COVID pathogens could simply be an unthoughtful scientist's mistake. The genetic modification of pathogen requires the right facilities, knowledge, and high skill. Why would any Chinese researcher in a reasonable state of mind want to intentionally unleash an incurable pathogen on their own people? Again, this stands as significant circumstantial evidence that COVID-19, if genetically modified, was accidentally released. The failure of the PRC to engage with the international community in transparently determining the exact nature of what actually happened at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in December 2019 is another significant circumstantial piece of evidence inferring a cover-up by Chinese officials. That brings us to the conclusion of part 4 of our series on the origins of COVID-19. Please join us the next time for the conclusion of our series, where we'll pull all of the direct evidence together and lay out the plausible inferences we can make based on the true origins of COVID-19. It is what it is for December 6, 2022. This is Hnatio reporting for the Objective News Network. We hope to see you the next time.